Hello, hi, hola. Let's get into Blender 2.79 because one of the updates for 2.8 is going to be better cloth simulation. And I wanted to do a little bit of inspiration about cloth simulations now just to get ready for it. And so I'm going to RY90 and I'm going to lift this up on the Z. I'm going to tab into it and pull it out some arbitrary amount here and get out, hit N, and take a look at the size. We've got a 2.0 and a 3.65. I'm going to turn those, I'm going to move that decimal point and call it 20 by 36. And then I'm going to hit Control R and cut those numbers down by half. I'm going to make 10 segments. Oh, heck, I'll make 10 cuts there, and I'll make 18 going across. So that's half of the numbers I just sort of came up with right now. Now, while I am looking at this object that will be a flag, I'm going to go into vertex groups and create things that will be pins when I make the cloth. It's very simple to make a flag. Make that new vertex group, call it pin, and assign a weight. And then I'm going to come out, I'm going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to make a cylinder that is very simple with 8 or 6 bits there. I'm going to make it a deep cylinder and a narrow cylinder. This is a flagpole. I will hit G and Shift X to constrain movement just to the up and down and along the Y. And so I'm going to pretend that my flag is attached to the pole there. And I want now to tab into the pole. I'll hit Control Tab F to go into faces. And I want the pivot of this to be at the bottom of the flagpole. Shift S lets me change where the 3D cursor will be. And then under Edit and Tools, I can set the origin of that object to the 3D cursor. Once that's done, I can hit Shift S and return the cursor to the center of the world. This means that when I hit R twice, I can move the flagpole around and it goes from the bottom, so I can pretend that it's in someone's hand. The flag as cloth is easy. This, select the flag, go to cloth, pick cloth, and then hit Alt-A and take a look. All right. Now we know it's attached. We go ahead and use pinning, and we've already created pins. We hit Alt-A and take a look. Okay. Alt-A, Shift left arrow, get back to the beginning. We can increase the steps, hit Alt-A, and it creates still a very wrinkly looking flag. So those steps are computational, and you can use them for things like blur if you do an animation and use your motion blur. I'm fine with 5, and I'm now going to see what stiffen does if I put it to 3. Alright, it is pretty stiff. It's not wrinkling on itself so much, and because I only want these to be short tests, I'm just going to go to 60 and then have it loop and loop and loop. I'm going to stop this, go to the beginning, and what I wanted this flag is less stiffness overall, but more stiffness in parts. I want to pretend that this flag has been sewn, and I'll hit Control Tab V, and I'll use Alt right click select, and then with Shift I'll get a couple others in here. And this is sort of imagining that colors have been sewn into this flag. So maybe it's red, white, and blue, RGB, or whatever. These vertices are going to go to a new group. And I'm going to call it seams. I will assign a lower weight, maybe a 0.3 more or less. And when I hit the simulation, everything seems to bend just about the same. So I'll run back over to the cloth. Our mass overall is 0.3. Maybe I want it to be half of that. And now it's, now it's like falling more gently in the wind. There's cloth stiffness, and there's structural stiffness, and I can use the seams that we just made, and there's a maximum of 15. That doesn't seem to have as much effect as bending stiffness, and that has a maximum that can go way up. I'll actually set it to 40 right now. You see that some of that has wrinkled back upward into the flag. I don't know if putting its mass back up is going to be of any use, but I do know that if I stop the animation and tab in and put that weight up to 1, we can see here that the seams are slender little things in the weight paint mode. Pin is certainly way up high here. I haven't... Yes. Seams are slender and light because I didn't reassign the value. So I changed the value from 0.3 to 1. I have to assign that new value before they become hard red stripes in weight paint. And so control space to hide that manipulator widget, and now we have something that's reacting a little bit differently than it was before. This is good. This may not be exactly the flag that I had in mind, so I'm going to take out the middle parts, oops, by going in, and I will get those guys and remove them from seams, and I think I'll get the ends here and assign those to seams. So when I select all of seams, I just have the edges of this flag. That is much more obvious. Now we can see that there's less folding happening around the edges and more of the folding happening on the inside. I want to now stretch this out to 250, whoops, and go back to the beginning. I'm going to stop my animation with Alt-A and now Shift right-click select my flagpole. I'm going to hit Control-P and simply make it apparent. And now when I run the animation and I have the flagpole in my control, I can hit R and wave my team's flag all over the place here. And I can imagine that a character is doing this, and it's animated and animated. And if I do turn on the animation button, which is, what is this, automatic keyframe insertion. Sounds pretty vicious, doesn't it? I'd like to start it lower at an X. I'm going to hit Alt-A and RR, and now I can just sort of animate the wave. Go team! Go Team Blender! Look at that, thing's flopping around all over the place. I'd probably opt to change some of the details in that flag, but this is an idea of making things a little bit more complicated, so you're not always looking at the exact same fabric all the time. This is not baked in, it's not locked into the animation just yet. I can still change its stiffness, I can still change that flag's behavior. What's good is that now the flagpole is definitely moving, and I can see whether or not that flag is going to wrap around too terribly, and also if it's going to do what I want it to do in the world of the scene. So we already know that we can get the flag and the pole to react with each other. So now what if we create something like a cylinder, and we shrink it down, and this is a character I have, and the character wears a hat. The character's name is Murdo. But what I wanted to do was make it so, when he moves the hat, there were tiny items on threads. I hit A by mistake. And the tiny bits on threads were hanging more heavily than the threads themselves. I don't know if you completely understand where I'm going with that, but I'm just going to do a round cube in the middle here. Make sure it's at 4. I'm actually going to lower that to 3 so that our computations are a little less intense. I'm going to take a face here and extrude it along the Z until we get to the top of this. I'm going to take the whole thing in edit mode and move it to the side. And I'm going to make it smaller. Where am I going to make it smaller? Here, I'll make it smaller. And then I'll hit Control I and make this smaller. And I will lift it here. Okay, so that's a little strange, but Control R, I will add a few more. Just winging it. So there's 6. Let's leave it at 6. Now we know that this, I need for that origin to be at the center of the object that will be its parent. So when I do Control P and use that object to parent it, there's no problem at the moment. We'll get into problems if I do something later without that origin being in the center. And we already know that things are going to fall apart if I run it now. So why don't I take this face, make some new group vertices, I'll call it pin and assign. And now what I want to do is something a little bit more special. I want this to be heavier than the thread. And so I'm pretending that this globe is the heavy. So I've called it heavy globe and I'm assigning that. Let's leave it at that. This is a lot like the flag, but now we have like a wrecking ball, or pretend we have a thread picking up a ship. Easily enough, we can pin with pinning. So when we hit Alt A on a shorter timeline of 60, all right, it flops. I don't know if you saw that. There we go. It flops like a wet, saggy grape. And if I move the parent, it's really floppy and kind of Dr. Seuss-like. So in the settings where there's cloth stiffness scaling, let's try it this way again. Let's use the heavy globe, and there's a max of 15. That heavy globe I'll put up to 50. And I'll try turning this. It's sluggish, but it's not, it's behaving more like it's made of a different cloth. It's not behaving like it's really structurally more together. This is good for some things. Perhaps if you have a dress that's made of different fabrics, and there's the light fabric and then there's a heavier fabric. I would recommend using structural stiffness for that heavier fabric. As far as bending stiffness goes, however, I want this to be a heavy globe. Having it a heavy globe means don't sag like a wet grape. And so now it's just bouncing in place. This might be good enough. I'm going to extend it to 250, and I'm going to go ahead and move my my parent object here. And so yes, sure enough, it looks like a wrecking ball. In this case, I could do Control Z and just go around and around, and now it swings out, and I have one of those swings that you see at the fair, or the playground, or the carnival. This is good. Now I will hit Alt A and Shift left to get back to the beginning. I'm satisfied with this, and now I'm going to pretend that it is a swing at the carnival. I want more swings. How am I going to get more swings? I could do a couple things. I could tab into it and select it all. I could hit period to go from the cursor. The 3D cursor is in the center of the round, the center point of the radius and diameter for my swing. I could hit Shift D, R, Z, and then make another one at 180 degrees, or at, I don't know, how many swings should there be? 66. Okay, 6. There. Shift D, R, Z, 60. Shift D, R, Z, 60. Pretty easy, right? Shift D, R, Z, 60. Make sure you don't put it on top of itself. R, Z, 60. Done. Come out. So what should happen? Control Tab will show us where the weights are for our vertex groups. It goes from object mode to weight paint mode. This is handy, and this is good. probably one of the best ways, especially if you're trying to do radial symmetry. Control Tab again, Alt A, and I will select my guy up top there and get him swinging. And sure enough, oh, I seem to have come around the center of that pivot. Ooh, slowly, slowly, slowly. So if we animated this turn, we could have these swings. It's obviously a little bit fast for swings. Woo! As soon as I stopped it with the right click, it just sort of jumped up in the air. I could hit comma to restore my turning to the object that I'm trying to affect, and we could dance it around like an octopus marionette with 2 missing legs and a dancing toy for the kids. And you'll notice that it's really quite slow. These objects are begging for a lot of computation. I didn't mean tab. I meant to right-click these guys. Now I'm going to give one more thing a try here, which is typically not something I see, and there might be a reason for that. This is going to be the parent. And winding up a cable means there has to be a bit of ground for that cable to land on, because I don't want to test that the plane is enough information for the cloth modifier to resist up against. And then in order to make the thread a cylinder with only 3 bits there and turned on the X, I'll make it really quite tiny. Now that it's tiny and it's there, I'm going to hit G and move it to a location near my soon-to-be spindle. That's going to be good enough for now. I'll tab in to edit mode, and with Control R I will just roll my mouse wheel up and up and up, and now it looks like we've got 36 cuts. Okay, and instead of sliding them, I just right click to put them where they started originally. I will take those 3 and I will create the good old-fashioned pin group, and I will assign back in object mode. I will shift right click select Control P, object parent. This is fine. And now you and I both know what happens when I hit play. Nothing, because we haven't turned this into a cloth. Now that pinning group is pin, and there we go. The plane, there's no collision with the plane. Cloth collision, self collision, collision group. Well, that answers that. So I will make a 1-object group by going to Object and creating a new group, or hitting Control G, and I will name this ground. I'll select this rope and make the collision group ground. And now it doesn't work. Probably because collision's not turned on. Oh yeah. So now what kind of problems can we create? Can I add this to a group? I will add this to this group. Object, group, add selected to active group. Ground. Yes. Now I've got a double threat here. Although I'm not exactly done, because you and I would also like to see something at the end of this winch that resembles maybe a very fast hook. This GY. So this is a heavy object. I'll control space to go up to the top of my heavy object, and I will create a new group called heavy object. I will assign this with a full weight of 1. I'll go back to my cloth. Whether I'm in object mode or edit mode, it will now allow me to do the cloth stiffness scaling, and we already know that the heavy object can go way up to 1,000 or even 10,000 if we need it. Let's see what this looks like. That looks pretty heavy. It doesn't look super heavy. As a matter of fact, it didn't look heavy at all. But some of that structural is an interesting problem for us because I'm going to use this as a winch, and it's going to give us... Ooh, hello. It got sticky. Once it folded over the edge there, it decided it belonged folded. No, we don't actually need you belong folded. So 80, oh, it folded up and held on to itself. So maybe the structural could come down a little bit. All right, there's a better mass. Oh, it looks like it's time for my alarm to go off. Here's what I'd like to do is test the winch. By making the spindle a collision object, things should change when I rotate on the X. And it's actually collecting the rope and pulling it up. I think that could be a real big help. So I'm going to keep an eye on things so the weight sinks through the floor. I was worried we were going to have that kind of problem. I think I'm going to change the shape of the floor. You may have problems like this as well. I'm going to make the floor a little friendlier for this to roll over and maybe prevent that heavy object from going all the way through it to the bottom. There, it kind of bumps into it. That's good. Okay, this is a winch. This is a winch that you can use. This is a winch you can put with spaceships or the dock or anything like that. And we also have self-collision. And so it's kind of fun to see how that's going to work. Let me... Ah, I meant to stop it. Trying to wrap it up nice and slow. Nice and slow. I think having this all the way up to 0.1 is really a big mess for Blender's cloth simulation at the moment. Presets rubber. Oh, look at that big rubber thing stretching back. Boy, rubber sure is slippery. That's really, really slippery. Who needs a winch? How about if this gets a little bit of a hill? That should help. Gosh. There we go. Well, I hope that some of these quick explorations have been a little inspirational and that you begin to use different types of cloth simulation and get ready for the new Blender that everyone is talking about when they say that the cloth simulation they're working on is going to be a whole lot better. Until then, thanks for watching.